And good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening for those that are watching this podcast number 15 already. My name is Ingmar Boon. I'm based in Belgium with a background in business applications. And that's also how I got to know one of our invites or guests today. But before giving the word to André, let me give you the word to Vishal as the founder and CEO of Ventory. Thank you very much, Vishal, but also thank you, of course, very much, André, for joining. And before going into this podcast, of course, please, Vishal, and please, André, introduce yourself, introduce Ventory, what you're achieving or trying to achieve together with Microsoft or together with Business Central, I should say. The floor is yours, Vishal.
Thank you, Ingmar. A pleasure to be here. So thank you for inviting us. So yes, I'm Vishal. I'm the founder and CEO of Ventory. We started the company a couple of years ago with the mission to essentially help enterprises, whether they are medium, small, or large, to digitize their field inventory. So when we talk about field inventory, this is inventory that's essentially sitting outside in the field, whether it's customer premises, whether it's outside their physical warehouses. It might be with their field engineers, technicians, even on customer premises. The most essential element that we try to work and solve for our customers is essentially giving them that visibility control, which often that they lack when their assets and inventory is actually out there in the field. So that's what Ventory is all about.
Well, thanks again, Vishal, for joining this podcast. Very much appreciated. André.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for hosting us today, Ikmar, because we've been knowing each other for, I think, almost 25 years by now. Because when I was at Microsoft, we acquired Navision back then, and you were still in the Navision team. And then we started working together, and it became a friendship over the years. And so it's great to be here today. And well, for the last 6 months now, I've been with Vishal trying to get Ventory from the ground as a startup. And I must say that Vishal has been doing an outstanding job with the team that's already in place in Belgium and in different countries. So we'll come back to what has already been done and what we try to achieve. But to come back to your questions and the Microsoft ecosystem. So after my Microsoft years, where we spent about 10 years together, I did help other ISVs, startups, scale-ups to develop their ecosystem and their business with Microsoft. And this is the same story that I'd like to replicate with Ventory, because Ventory runs on Microsoft Azure. So and only on Microsoft Azure as a SaaS solution. So this is why Microsoft is, again, very close to our hearts and our minds. And that's why we try to develop also that ecosystem with Business Central partners, with Dynamics F&O partners. And that's where we would also need some help from Microsoft to connect the dots. So looking forward to developing this next to, of course, direct sales that we'll be doing.
Thank you. Well, thank you, André. Thank you, Vishal, for that introduction. Mm-hmm. And maybe just a small hook to what you said around Azure. You just announced a couple of weeks ago, I believe, that you're also active on the marketplace. You are a transactable solution today, which is, from a programmatic compensation perspective, quite important. But I want to go back to the hook that you shared, Vishal, and also our first meeting a couple of months ago, maybe already 6 months ago, when André invited me to your company here in Belgium. And I remember my first thoughts, and I think I've messaged that also during the meeting, was like, yeah, you know, inventory. I mean, what new can you invent? And then I remember you were explaining what you were doing. And I think I mentioned at that moment, like, yeah, but what you're doing is a long tail. And until that moment, I didn't realize, and that's why I think it's always good to meet founders and innovators like yourself, Vishal. I didn't realize that was such a gap in the market. And when you explained to me, like, well, and I think you said something like, yeah, indeed, it's the long tail of inventory, but it's unexplored, and companies don't always or don't know how much inventory they have, the value of the inventory, where it's exactly located. and you gave the example of I think a telecom company that has several stores in a country or an area, and every store has a bit of inventory. You said like, hey, that's maybe today more than just that, but that's what we do, managing that long tail inventory. And I was like, wow, this is brilliant. And then so happy again to have you on the podcast. And the podcast is not about the solution only, but I definitely would like to spend a few minutes, Vishal, on that long tail. And it always sounds like, hey, but this is mini, but I think it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
Can you explain a bit more about the solution itself and the solution, but the gap that you are seeing, or the market opportunity that you are seeing with your solution?
Yeah, sure. So maybe a bit of background. So André he brings a lot of SaaS, Microsoft Azure background for us, right? So something important which skipped my mind was that I spent about 13 years in logistics before Ventory. And one of the things that we have seen as a recurring trend, when you're in the logistics, working within logistics, you understand and see firsthand what enterprises are doing with their materials. That's one. And the second thing also that I spent quite some time in was working as a CIO or head of IT or head of warehouse management systems in my previous life, whether it was at DHL or Panalpina, which was acquired by DSV in 2018, 2019. And what we saw was firsthand that enterprises within, whether it's medium, large enterprises, there was this trend in the market where what I call as the Amazonization of the world, which is a basic comparison from this B2C model to B2B model, where enterprises are expecting their materials, whether it's high value, critical assets, inventory, to be closer to their point of need. And what that means is that people, especially businesses, are no longer willing to wait for more than 24 hours, 48 hours for their inventory to be put into action in order to bring back the asset that may have gone down. Let me give you a real example. Let's say 15 years ago or 20 years ago, you talked about the telecommunication sector. So let's take an example of Sony Ericsson, a company that doesn't exist, but now it's Ericsson or Nokia. Even though Nokia stepped out of the telecommunications, the handset device business, which is hardly from a market leader to nowhere in the market almost, but they're still a king or a leader within the cell tower communications business. Right. So if you look at that example, if telecommunications asset, a cell tower goes down for whatever reason, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, an SLA of 24 hours, 48 hours was relatively acceptable for a manufacturer like a Nokia or an Ericsson. Today, this is no longer acceptable. Their customers expect the asset to be back up and running, in this case, a telecommunications tower, within maybe 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours, because the importance of that tower and a financial impact that it essentially has on that customer's business when it comes to transactions being performed. Now, if you basically extrapolate that use case from a telecommunications tower to a data center center's importance 20 years ago was much lower because of the volume of transactions that were happening at that moment in time versus today. And that shift is primarily driven through digitization, but also customers' expectations that have shifted to having that instant gratification or that instant back up online. And competition has changed as well. Competition has changed. Today, if Nokia or Ericsson are unable to deliver that SLA to that customer, there is another competitor from China. There is another competitor, maybe from the United States, or another competitor from So this monopolization has also shifted to multiple competitors who are willing to take your place. if you are unable to meet that SLA. So a lot of it has been driven by customer expectation, but also competition and innovation. You talked about speed of innovation earlier. So, so what that means is that manufacturers, whether it's medical devices, whether it's telecommunications, whether it's infrastructure, you name it, across a broad spectrum of industries, have shifted their storage of stock and critical inventory, whether it doesn't matter if it's high value, low value, but more and more out in the field. So that supply chain model has completely shifted, right? That's one big shift. The other big shift, which has been relatively slow in the market, is if you think about SAP, if you think about Business Central or Navision we talked about, or Office Business, the Dynamics 365, these solutions have seen another shift, which is in the opposite direction. So where data centers have shifted, where on-prem, data centers, where enterprises was normal 20 years ago to have on-prem data centers. I've been to data centers of customers where there were 3 redundant server centers with 3 redundant diesel generators. If there was a catastrophe happening, that your data center would be up and running. I mean, people were spending millions. But if you think about the innovation and the disruption that services like Azure or AWS or other similar cloud services have brought in, was, what? It is easy to shift from on-prem to cloud or private clouds. So suddenly, the biggest innovation within the ERP system landscape has been moving from making your ERP compatible, from moving to on-prem to private clouds. That's the opposite of what has happened in the supply chain. Because the moment you shift your materials out,
That's a good point. Yeah.
The reach of your digital solutions becomes less and less controllable.
Yeah.
But you're trying to move everything into this centralized warehouse of your data warehouse or your cloud. And so these 2 industries have had a different shift, but in a different direction. And that gap is what Ventory is trying to or aspiring to fill with a solution that allows enterprises to focus of best of breed solutions, which is ERPs. We're not there to compete with ERPs like SAP and so on, or Business Central. We are there to maximize the edge compute innovation that has happened over the last 5 years with the launch of the iPhone in 2007 and so on, with things like Copilot that has been launched for cloud services literally over the last 2 to 3 years.
There's a word that pops up in my mind, Vishal, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, because you mentioned the word edge. What you're in fact delivering is some kind of a supply chain edge.
Yes.
That's how I could look at your solution. You're also on the outside. It's not the right wording, but I think I think we are aligned on that thinking. Like, we are not in the core. You are touching all the different bespoke.
That's right.
Inventory, small-ish inventory locations that are disparated over the country,
Correct.
over an area, for a certain manufacturer, a certain distributor, a certain telecom operator.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry, André.
If I may do an analogy here, and Vishal knows probably the one I'm going to make, but it's like Business Central or any ERP WMS system. I would compare it to a big submarine. In your submarine, you can control everything that you do internally. This is very secure. You have everything under control and everything is visible. But once you go outside of your submarine, this can be very dark waters. You don't see what's in front of you, except if you have a good radar and things like that. But Ventory is a bit like your periscope on your submarine. So thanks to Ventory, you can see what's outside in those remote, external, smaller locations that you usually don't have control on or visibility on, thanks to your classic Business Central setup or any other ERP WMS system. So we extend the value of your ERP system thanks to adding Ventory on top of it. And this is something that we need to explain again and again, because some people do believe that an ERP is doing it all and that they don't need solutions like ours. So
spot on, André, because that's what I thought when I
I
met
know.
you, Vishal, and of course when we met André, I was like, guys, what are you doing? I mean, this all exists in Business Central, and then you started explaining, Vishal, and I was like, I hear you, I see you, and I was like, yeah, spot on, spot on.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Well, I hope the audience understands what your solution does today. In the meantime, we've also touched on other topics. We've talked about Azure, we've talked about Edge or Azure or AWS, the cloud. We've talked about the Edge, we've talked about Copilot. You could argue that, as you said, that shift from global to more local, that's kind of innovation or innovation expectation. Customer expecting like, hey, the tower is down. I need to be back up online in the next 3 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours. That same is happening indeed with supply chain in your expertise or area of expertise. From a technology perspective, how do you look at innovation? And I know innovation is like a big word, but IT innovation, Copilot, Azure services.
Yes.
How do you look at that?
Yeah, so I think before diving into innovations, I think maybe I would like to spend maybe a couple of minutes talking about the challenges that these companies face in the field from a business dynamics perspective, and I think the first big challenge that a lot of these enterprises face is starting with the simple challenges, which is I do not have a digital solution out in the field. So typically the most common approach of dealing with this challenge is Excel and Google Sheets, right? So I need to know what's out there so that I can pump it into my ERP system. So that's the first thing that we have to think about, saying we are there. Our biggest competitor is not some other application out there. Our biggest competitor is Microsoft Excel, actually. So that's the first thing to think about. The second challenge actually that comes to, that we came across early on was if you think about a company, since we touched on a company like Nokia, for instance, just to be fully transparent, Nokia is not our customer. But the reason I brought them up here is because today Nokia technologies or cell communication technologies touches almost 6 billion to 7 billion people of the 8 billion people living in the world. Right, so that's why we are using it as a generic example. So if you think about it, the big challenge that a Nokia, for example, would face is they're dealing with multiple OEM components in a cell tower, right? So a company like a Proximus, for example, or Verizon, for instance, they just don't have Nokia components in one big cell tower. They might have maybe 100 different manufacturers that they're working with. So now if we kind of zoom out the supply chain from a grand scheme perspective, 36,000 feet, all of these components have to be orchestrated. The way they're orchestrated today is these components are probably coming into a central warehouse that may be run and operated by a big third-party logistics company like a DHL. These components have their own barcodes. These barcodes have their own historical reasons why these barcodes are in a certain format. Some products have an expiry date. Some products have a recertification date. Some products have a warranty period. Now, all of these products coming into a 3PL have to be relabeled because a traditional ERP system has zero knowledge of what the logic is behind these bespoke products coming in to a central warehouse. So the product, the moment it touches the warehouse, it has to be relabeled. Relabeling means touching the product, sticking on a different label, making sense out of the old legacy barcodes into a new label format before it can be ingested into the network. whether it's of Nokia, whether it's of the customer of Nokia, or even DHL for that matter, in order to create traceability. So that's the first place where Ventory comes in to bring value, which is, we call it digital relabeling. Digital, and this is not, I don't want to get into a sales pitch, but what is important is that digital relabeling has its own advantages, which is you no longer need to touch the product with another paper, with another printer, so the system we saw a gap in the market where customers can simply onboard an existing OEM label into your supply chain.
Just that I understand correctly, Vishal, and I don't see that
Yes.
as sales pitch, although I think it's great value what you're explaining. It means that the tagging is just being reused, but maybe with extra information.
Correct. That's right. So,
are you new?
Is
this new? Is this new? Are you the first, or not the first one, maybe? But
I don't know if we are the first ones, but we've definitely have not come across such a solution out in the market, which we call as digital relabeling. So the value actually for the customer starts with, wow, I can ingest as a distributor, I can onboard or import my 90 suppliers or manufacturers into my warehouse, into my supply chain without having to relabel. And if I'm doing 160,000 relabelings a month, activity is gone. That activity is gone. Okay, so that's the first value proposition that we see out in the field. The second value proposition is, if you think about the economic situation we are facing today in the world, which is on a multitude of areas. First is the world is much more ESG conscious, where we are talking about reducing our carbon footprint. We are talking about reducing our e-waste. We're talking about recycling. We're thinking about reuse, repurpose, and repair, right? Those are the fundamental things that a lot of organizations are really focusing on. Now, whether this has translated into real implementations is a different story, because every organization is a different journey, maturity on that level. But what we see from our existing experience with customers is that there is a massive amount of e-waste happening, especially in the high tech and the med tech stuff. Because when you don't have visibility of what's out there in the field, 99% of the time we see there is excess inventory holdup in the field because of the emotional fear of not having enough on customer premises and to keep that customer happy. And what we see firsthand is that when customers deploy a digital solution like Ventory, is that they see a 30% reduction on average of their field inventory. And 30% means a 30% impact on your balance sheet, because this material is actually sitting on the manufacturer's balance sheet, not on the customer's, because it's not invoiced to the customer yet.
That's the hamstering effect, and that we can avoid.
Brilliant.
On that side, and also the fact that for many of those components there is an expiration date, as Vishal was mentioning, in some industries, but you don't have any visibility on, are they going to take the right parts out of the stock, meaning the one that has the closest expiration date, for example, or are they going to take just the first one they see on the shelves? And that's where FIFO or LIFO, whatever rule, is really important to manage. And this is where we can help them to better manage and avoid that wastage that Vishal was talking about, and be more efficient. So
yeah.
So if I go back to my previous question, your innovation is indeed maybe thanks to technology, but it's really focused on that supply chain innovation at its core.
Yes. We call it digitization and digitalization journey in the field. I think that is what it really comes down to. And we are not here to compete with solutions like work order management systems, which enterprises may be using or may not have in the field. We are not there. We have been very clear with who we want to be and who we don't want to be also at the same time. Because we don't want to be seen as a threat to an ERP solution. We are there to complement and increase, as André said, the investment that enterprises have all medium, large, whatever, have already made in their ERP solution. But at the same time, some of our customers actually don't even have an ERP system. And for them, we also tell them the solution will be there for them whenever they are ready for an ERP solution as well. So that Ventory can inject that data, the master data ownership towards that ERP system whenever they're ready for an ERP system. And that is a fundamental difference, that we don't want to become an ERP system. We don't want to become a work order management system. We are there to enrich the data that exists within these systems.
Yeah.
And whether the customer may be using a hybrid workforce, a hybrid model in the field, where you may have in-house engineers, external engineers, in-house staff, external staff like store points or distributors or end state customers who are even accessing the materials when they're doing an inbound or an outbound, they have access to a single unified solution in a secure way that connects into the ERP system.
Yeah.
But
Brilliant.
maybe also to boil it down to the main use cases that we see, Vishal and Ikmar, we see really two main use cases being the biggest one that we encounter. So the first one is everything related to spare part management. And so all the companies having field technicians. And it can be field technicians under the payroll, but it can also be contractors. So being external to it. So can you imagine giving access to your SAP system or your Dynamic Central, Business Central, sorry, if you are not part of the company? That can be an issue. And the second business case, that's everything linked to vendor managed inventories or consigned stocks, if you can put it that way. And there, if you look in the hospitals, for example, you have implants, you have all the products that they must use from medtech companies. But as long as nobody tells those medtech companies what has been used, they don't know it, they don't see it, they cannot invoice it, and then you can run out of stock because of this. So this is where innovation, the first step into innovation, that's to get the basics right. And then once you have those basics right, then you can indeed come with additional innovation steps, like a copilot helping you. And this is something that we are very concretely looking at. This is something that would help them not only to use it efficiently, but to go one step beyond, to do proactive stock maintenance, and to make sure that you never run out of stock, because the copilot is going to analyze how you use those stock and to help you to do the best forecast and the best replenishments, so that you can be really the most efficient on the financial side, but also on the operation side. So I hope it's clear, but that's that's in two steps, because if you don't have the basics right, if you don't have the visibility and control, you cannot be innovative with.
I hear you.
Yeah, and as a startup, we had to focus our resources in phases, right? I mean, one of the most precious thing in any company is resource, and in a startup, it's your human resources. And when we started the company, 2 years ago, our focus was let's first focus on edge compute. Edge compute in the sense, okay, we know that we are dealing with different types of labels. We know that, for example, our customers often see in their day-to-day working life in the field that they lose connection to the servers, to the cloud. So they're not often connected. So let's focus on giving offline capabilities. And if you have to now give offline capabilities, that means you have to rely on the onboard GPU and CPU, so that translated into edge compute. How can we package the product and the smartness of the product that is fully reliant and deployable and secure, while able to extract the intelligence on the device itself? So that was our main focus. How can we ensure that stock counting exercises, where you're physically or manually counting materials out in the field, can be done as fast as possible using AI that's deployed in the field, image analytics that's deployed on the device itself? So that is what we worked on for almost 2 years, and to perfect that, and we are still on that journey, right? But the most important thing, the success of the product, was first seen in the field.
Makes sense.
Now that we started getting that feedback over the 2 years, we now have shifted our attention to saying, okay, the field is now covered. Now let's focus on how can we bring value, not just to the engineer that we've been working on in the field for the last couple of years, but to the supervisor who does not use the mobile app. So 80 to 90% of our users are out in the field, right? And the other 10%, who are the decision makers, are the ones who are usually using and relying on the cloud platform. And that's where Andre's point on the copilot, on the intelligence now in the cloud.
Yeah.
So it's about what do you do with the data that's coming in from the field that I can now strategize by saying, hey, you know what? I have too much of this material at these locations. Where does it need to be redistributed based on the cadence and the velocity on the consumption to these other locations? Or what kind of instructions should be given out in the field in order to improve my stock accuracy from 99% to 99.99%, for instance? And that's where the intelligence now, which is the strategy element, fits into the cloud.
I hear you. I love your story, Vishal. And I know that when André joined Ventory last year, I should say. Yes, André, right?
Yeah, correct.
One of your goals, I think, André, was also to look at the partner channel, or to build out a channel, let me put it like that, to really start scaling. So you have a great value, or a great product value. How important is that channel, and how easy is it to convince partners to say, like, hey, we have a unique solution that can help you with edge supply chain? How is that going? How important is that? Can you talk about that, André or Vishal?
Yeah, yes. Well, actually, that's a two-step model. So we do the direct approach with some customers, and we try to, of course, get some direct contacts with different players in the market and different type of prospects and customers, being it SMB type of customers, but also enterprise. But then in parallel, we started to work on the ecosystem and to build that ecosystem. And there you have different types of partners. And so you have the technology partners like Microsoft. So obviously Microsoft is the main one. We are present on the marketplace. We run on Azure. We want to start co-selling with the Microsoft sellers in SMC, in enterprise. So this is obvious. But that's chicken and egg. We first need, of course, to have a few references so that they can trust us. So, it takes time. But this is something that we definitely started. We're agnostic on the ERP and WMS side, so we can connect with anyone. So we do the same with SAP. We do the same with others. But Microsoft is the first one, and that's the most important one on the technological partner type of partnerships. Then you have the very specific type of partners, like the third-party logistics partners, like DHL. DHL has been, thanks to Vishal, of course, and his background, one of the first believer into Ventory. So that's a customer, but also a partner, because they do manage the inventories for many customers worldwide. And so they use also Ventory to do this. And so Ventory is one piece of the puzzle that they use to be most efficient and to be better than their competitors. So that's a very specific type of partnership, but that's an important one in our business. Then you have the system integrators type of partners. And then we have partners, great partners like Delaware, for example. And so that's one partner that's doing not only Microsoft, but also SAP. And so it takes time to build that knowledge internally, to make sure that the account teams know what Ventory can add as a value on top of it. Then we need to do the first POCs together. We need to have, it takes time to build that, but this is something that we started, and we see also in the pipeline some deals coming from partners such as Delaware. And we have also contacts with others like Segica, to talk about Belgium. But I mean, if you talk worldwide, we have also partnerships being discussed with Deloitte and other types of partners. So those are the big ones, let's say, who can also do the implementation. But we have also some freelance consultants even, who could be referral partners. So those ones being supply chain freelancers, and they go from one job to the other, and that's important to them to have a complete view of what's in the market. And those are also potential referral type of partners.
And so today, I'm not asking for numbers, André or Vishal, but I could imagine maybe today direct sales is 90% and partner sales is 10%, something like that, or 80-20 or 95-5. How do you look at the future? Is that a approach strategy that you're saying like, hey, we want to go much more into partner, moving it maybe to partner 90% and direct sales 10%? Is there a vision on that?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think that Vishal can complement my answer. But today, yes, that's correct. We do much more in direct sales because we need to act fast and we need to control that and we need to prove that we have a good solution and we get the first references ourselves. But we have already some references coming from partners like the ones that I mentioned. And we want to go the opposite. So today, if it's more direct, in a few years, hopefully it will be for 2/3 or 75-80%, it will be indirect. But that's something that needs to be built, and we need to have the right partners and to invest in a co-marketing, in a co-selling, in a co-training model with them. And this is something that takes time, as you know, because you need to gain the trust from those partners and to prove yourself. So it will take time, but this is definitely what we want to achieve, because we do not want to do the professional services part ourselves. And so we do want to focus on our product and to remain an ISV. We do not want to become a professional services type of company, delivering also all the implementations and support ourselves.
But I can also imagine that today, when you, Vishal, you mentioned like, hey, we're getting feedback from the fields. That's of course very necessary. That always, of course, to get feedback. But that's because you have a direct relationship. The information is one-on-one. Also, there I can imagine like, hey, a shift is going to happen. If you're going to work more with partners, imagine tomorrow 90% partners and 10% direct. You'll have to find a system. How can we still capture that information from end customers without being hampered by our channel? And so I'm not saying like, hey, please give me the answer on how you're going to approach that. But again, part of your strategy is indeed going more partner, but that will create new challenges from how can we capture that information from end customers and put that into our products.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think when we managed to convince André to join the team, one of the fundamental discussions when, in the whole exploration phase we were talking about is André's vision, how he saw the whole partner ecosystem and the sales ecosystem in general. And I think one of the things that resonated with us at that moment in the early discussions was building a partner ecosystem is like growing a plant, or where there's a lot of nurturing that has to happen in the early stages. But at the same time, when you're building a product at the same time as growing a plant, these things have to happen in parallel. Growing a product means keeping your pulse on the business of the customer, keeping the pulse on the operations of that customer, having that first line of contact with the actual user in the field. And something that our head of engineering back then had done was to be able to track, of course, in a GDPR compliant way and so on, how users were using the solution, who are the key users, how many scans were they doing a day. And we could see that in the early immature dashboards that we had built. And what we saw was there were a few people who were very much using the solution and they were kind of integrated into the product development lifecycle of the product, of the solution. And I think that has been our constant challenge and ambition to make sure that, we have a few very intimate relationships with customers. We have a few very intimate relationships with early partners before we scale that thing up. And one of the things that André has been working on is, while building the whole direct sales business and nurturing the few customers that we have, but also at the same time nurturing the few partners that we have and really giving that 200% to the existing relationships on both elements, while getting to a point where the product is 90% there with a head of engineering and product, while at the same time working on what is it that the partners are asking for, what is it that the customers are asking for, and how can we make the partners independent more and more over the course of the coming years, that we can achieve that ambition of the numbers that we talked about. What split is that percentage going to be? And we don't know the answer to that, to be very honest with you, except we know more or less where we want to be and where we are today.
Yeah. Super.
But partners will play a key role for sure. So,
yes.
André, what did you say?
Partners will play a key role for sure.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I hear you. We're almost at the end of our podcast. Time flies when you're having fun. So my last question to both of you, Vishal and André. Of course, André, you have your background with Microsoft. Vishal, you start to know, I hope, Microsoft much better than it probably potentially was in the past. But if there would be one suggestion to Microsoft from a Dynamics partner ISV perspective that would help you in growing faster, in finding more customers easier, what would be that one suggestion to Microsoft?
Should I start,
André,
Vishal,
I think you're the one living it.
Yeah. Well, two things I would say, Igmar. First of all, I've been seeing Microsoft, of course, from the inside, but also from the outside and from different positions at system integrators, at distribution partners, at ISVs. And something that always struck me on the BizApp side is that BizApps is still today a kind of company within the company. So at Microsoft, you have indeed a better integration between BizApps and the other business division, let's say, but it's still like an island within the company. And I think that the more walls you will break between the BizApps division and the others, and the more connections will be established, the better it will be. I think it's much better than before, especially with Azure and things like that. But I think that that's one holistic view, one holistic fundamental change that needs to happen over time. And then the other one is linked to the marketplace, and it's not only for BizApps, but the marketplace. And I can tell you, Microsoft is really good at it, because when I try to do the same with other companies, being competition partners of Microsoft, it's more cumbersome, it's less easy, less smooth. So, but there is still a long way to go. And so the marketplace is a great tool to be seen. I mean, to do a promotion of the solutions that we have. But how can we make sure that we stand out, and how can we make sure that we generate really concrete leads and not only window dressing and visibility? And there, I'm not there yet. So I really would like to see more concrete visits coming from the marketplace and concrete leads coming from the marketplace, so that we can then co-engage with Microsoft sellers in a co-sell scenario. Of course, we do share the pipeline through Partner Center. We do get some connections, and it remains a business of people. So you do business with people, and it's important to get to know each other, and it takes time. But I'm sure that the marketplace is a really great tool that can be accelerated. I don't have the silver bullet, but I think that we could and we should get more concrete opportunities out of it, and for Microsoft and for us, and then we could nurture those together.
Thank you, André. I'm going to ask you next extra question. First, I'll let Vishal ask if he has any different perspectives.
I think for us, when we decided to go on the whole Microsoft journey, for me, I don't have the background that or perspective that André has had over his career. I'm looking at it from a two-hat perspective, which was having been a CIO before and now as a founder of an ISV. I saw it so much like a black and white, where Microsoft is versus where other ERPs and cloud providers are. I think that the world is going through, when it comes to software solutions, whether it's SaaS, doesn't really matter, is a massive democratization of services, or what we call as service-oriented architecture. and the more cloud providers, ISVs, hosting and server data center providers and stuff like that, like Azure, for instance, or even biz apps like Business Central and so on and so forth, the more they become agnostic and not insular, trying to protect their borders and so on and so forth. The company that's going to be able to get to that point of democratization first, allowing their customers to choose the best of breed solutions. Like tomorrow, if Ventory is no longer the best in the market, and if there's something else out there, yes, a customer should be able to change it without having to go into a massive 5-year cycle of software decommissioning and sunset. I mean, that's just so archaic. And I think that companies, enterprise, whether it's small, medium, large, they have recognized this, that they can no longer go on this journey, because the speed of innovation that you talked about at the very early point is that they have recognized this. They can no longer be held hostage to such an approach. At least I would say the world is shifting.
Fully
and I
agree.
think
Yeah.
For us, Microsoft was, and I'm not saying this because you work for Microsoft, but I think for me, Microsoft was the most democratized we had seen as a provider, as a leader in the market, and I think that was the reason for us. It was very clear why Microsoft was why Microsoft was the autobahn that we had to get onto if we had to scale the company and the product.
Well, super feedback, Vishal, and I would love to have a separate conversation on some of the points that you mentioned for I hope a next time. And to your point, André, when you talk about leads and marketplace, I'm like, yeah, I hear you. And then you could say like not only customer leads, but also partner leads.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, of course.
Especially with the marketplace being a global marketplace, wouldn't it be great if you could add on your marketplace something like, hey, we are let's call it EMEA or Belgium ISV, and we're looking for partners with that and that and that expertise in those regions. If you have customers like this, and then this, we could add a lot of value to your solution, etc., etc., etc. And I think it's fairly easy, versus only looking at the marketplace from a customer perspective. So that's where I see a lot of value, potentially future value, for partners that are on the marketplace to find new partners via the marketplace or via a common place. Step
by step, and but I'm sure that we'll get there. And you have indeed many steps. You're many steps ahead of the competition for sure on that side. So I can agree with what Vishal was saying. That's correct. Also, the startup programs, by the way, that we could participate to. That's also something that's very rich compared to what others could give to us. So Okay.
Well, maybe for next time, André, Vishal. It was really, really great talking to you again, André, seeing you virtually here on this podcast. Vishal, I learned a lot. I knew a bit, and I knew a bit about your solution, but I really learned a lot again about your solution. Thank you for joining this podcast. I would say have a very great day, have a very great week, and I hope to see you very soon again, potentially on this podcast or in real life. Thank you very much, and talk soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.